Okay, so we're going back to our book, Following and Finding an Authentic Life. And last week, if you remember, we started talking about what happens if you say no to calls. Because, you do have that choice sometimes. But as with Jonah, if the call is strong enough and it really is a necessary call, then things might happen and you will be guided to return to it. Rabindranath Tagore wrote, "I have spent my days stringing and unstringing my instrument while the song I came to sing remains unsung."
That's deep.
Yeah. I long ago discovered that boredom is characterized by restlessness, not listlessness, and by activity, not the lack of it. This is why we refer to it as climbing the walls. The bored are fidgeters, doodlers, and daydreamers. So are procrastinators, who are further distinguished by resistance that often masquerades as quite frantic activity, even workaholism, not as laziness, which is popularly associated with procrastinators. Workaholism is a perfect disguise because it's one of the few socially sanctioned addictions. It may be just another way of going to sleep in the bottom of the boat, but you can put it on a resume. The louder the calling, the more energy you need to use to outshout it. The more energy you exhaust in doing so, and the less energy you have left over to pursue the call itself, which may be precisely your unconscious objective. I suspect that the energy you have bound up in resisting your own potential is more energy than you'll need to reach it. It takes as much energy to fail as it does to succeed. The strategies of restless non-compliance, both conscious and unconscious, are legion, hiding behind the tasks of discernment. By analysing a call to death and picking apart all its varying implications, and by poring over calculations that would put an actuary into a coma, we lose all the heat from the heart through the head, as if we had been in the bitter cold without a hat. You know, I've heard it said as, you analyse until you're paralysed. And I don't know about you, but I've been especially guilty of that. It is, it's one of my signature avoidance strategies. You know, have to analyse, reanalyse, check the analysis, double check, and then by the time you're finished, you avoid it. The next one is waiting for the perfect moment. Waiting for just the right combination of time, money, energy, education, freedom, and the ideal alignment of the planets. For most people, says professional public speaker Rosie Perez, the refrain goes, it's 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready, 3 to get ready, 3 to get ready. And if you think about it, that's another avoidance strategy that we all use, that everything has to be just perfect, otherwise we can't do anything or move forward. Telling yourself lies. For instance, I've responded to several different calls with the same fish story. I can't afford it. I can't afford to take the time or spend the money or learn the skills. Can't afford to get off the hamster wheel even momentarily, lest my life come to a grinding halt. None of it was ever true though. The truth was, I won't afford it. I won't reprioritize my life, won't make sacrifices, won't disrupt my family, won't forgo eating out in restaurants for 6 months to be able to buy myself the education I need. And again, I think this has been true of all of us, that can't is a very convenient substitute for won't. Okay. Telling myself repeatedly that I can't afford it only grinds into my subconscious a message of self-imposed limitation. It's an abdication of my desires, a surrendering of my power to outside influences like time and money. And it's the emotional equivalent of a rap of the knuckles at the cookie jar. A young man studying to be a monk in Germany once visited me when I lived in San Francisco. I asked him which of his vows he found the most difficult to honour, imagining that he would say celibacy or silence. He said that without a doubt, it was honesty. And I thought about that quite a bit, and I thought, you know what? Very often we are not honest with ourselves. It's not that we're not honest with other people. It's ourselves that we lie to and make
Guilty
excuses.
as charged.
There you go. Yes.
I didn't hear what she said.
Guilty
She said
as
guilty
charged.
as charged.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah. You're all awfully quiet this morning. Choosing a path parallel to the one you feel called to. One that's close enough to keep an eye on it, but not so close that you're tempted to jump tracks. You become an art critic rather than an artist, a school teacher rather than a parent, a reporter rather than a novelist. I thought that was very interesting. Any of you feel guilty of doing that?
All right, raise your hand, come on.
Yeah? Oh, they did. Enough for me to see. Okay. Attempting to replace one calling with another because you don't like it. Your parents don't like it. It doesn't earn enough money or prestige. Perhaps you're called to work for the poor, or you were trained as a white-collar worker but feel called to do blue-collar work. Instead, you try to substitute something else for it, hoping that a more lucrative or prestigious or secure pursuit will appease the spirits that gave you the call. And I think again that's another one that we don't like admitting to. Yes, Akhilesh.
So it just seems to me that when we are talking about callings, or have been, we are talking about our occupation, the thing that makes us money, or that gets
I think in
gets
one
us a
instance,
livelihood.
yes, we are.
So,
Uh-huh.
but I think we may want to start moving away from that assumption, because as our work days become less and less, as things like AI and robots and all take over a lot of our
Mhm.
jobs, with self-driving cars and things like that, tutors, whatever. I think our work week is in the next 10 years is probably going to go down to 4 days a week and then
Mhm.
3 days a week. So and also I think there may be a universal basic income and living credits and so on that we may all get. So the amount of time that we devote to earning a livelihood may become much less, and the amount of time we devote to other activities, which could then become our calling, which now we classify as hobbies or as things we do on the side,
Right.
would actually take up more of our time if our work week becomes less. And so anyone can pursue whatever they want without regard to financial or ego gain, I guess. So I think it's possible that we'll all be doing our callings more and more, since we will be spending less time
That's
chasing
an
a living.
interesting observation. Yes, Mary.
I think that's right, but I also think that, it has to do with the calling of your heart for what you want to do. I read an article about a couple that are living not too far down 412. They didn't start here. They started in other places. They met in school, and what they wanted was to become farmers. And they wanted to be on the land, and that was their calling to be. And they had to overcome a lot of things. They got their degrees. They went to California to learn how to be organic farmers, the best way to do that. And they've ended up in Oklahoma, in the northeast corner, and they're selling their stuff at the farmers market. Yay for them! But they're very open and honest about how much that it costs. Their net and their what they were making and what they were getting, and from time to time, but they also, one of the things they liked about it was, like what Akulish said, was that during the fallow season, they would plow the land under to replenish it. And so now then they're going off to other countries during that period of time to work with those people about how to restore the land.
Oh, how fun. That's very interesting.
So they get the best of both. They get to raise their daughter here on the land, and they all get to work on it. Then they get to go somewhere else. So something that they were called to help the food situation.
Right.
And they didn't really care about the money.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it has so much to do with your heart.
Yes.
With what your heart wants you to do.
Right. I remember when I was at school, they used to talk about having a job or having a vocation. Mm-hmm. And the vocation was your calling. And it could be anything from going into a convent to teaching. But it was interesting how vocations were specifically defined and all the rest were jobs. So there was no, according to that notion, there was no fulfillment, no self-fulfillment through just doing a job. Yes, Jason?
It seems like we just read from a perspective of the ego, these blocks or whatever to fulfilling our calling.
Uh-huh.
We have to sacrifice who we are now. So it's almost like the sacrifice is scaring us to almost recoil in a way, or create these mental blocks or these different things. But when in reality, the reality of it is it'd be way more. We'd be gaining a whole lot more,
yes, I know,
and getting more, but
it's giving in, it's surrendering to get to that point. Yes,
Exactly what I was going to say. It goes back to the surrender. The surrender, you have to, it's a faith or a calling of belief that we have to surrender to it.
Yes, exactly. And that's what all these excuses are about. They're avoidance strategies for surrendering, for just accepting. Yes, Mary?
Also, too, so you have a calling and you do it, you pursue your calling. But that doesn't mean then that another calling might come.
Mm-hmm.
You might also notice that you have done this now, and it's been fulfilled for you and the people around you or whatever. And now it's time for another calling. So, but sometimes I think we get stuck in the fact, well, this is what I'm supposed to do, and so I just better stay here. you know?
Right,
But,
right.
and that's true. However, there are other things too.
And in fact, I
Not
was
static.
trying to find where there was, because in here it does actually say about two callings at the same time. Actually,
Well, I was just thinking about, so if you look back, let's say, on English society, at the time of the English peak, when the sun
Right.
never set on the British Empire,
right,
the word amateur comes from love, right?
Right.
From the Latin root of love.
Mhm.
So you had all these sort of eccentric gentlemen usually, but also ladies, who would pursue whatever they
They
enjoyed
loved,
doing, whatever they
yes.
loved, and a lot of progress came out of that too.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems that as a society, we might all be moving towards the ability to do that, especially if our basic needs are taken care of, our livelihood is taken care of to more and more of a degree. We can all become gentlefolk and not do any, not have to work for a living, I suppose. At
That's
least not for most of
interesting.
our time. So
Yeah, that's
agree.
interesting. Jason, you wanted to say something
I
before
don't
we
know.
moved on from there?
Yeah, I got lost.
Oh, okay, that's all right.
That's-
It may come back.
Yeah, that's-
Yes, Barbara.
Well, I just wanted to say that I think in the coming around to the higher consciousness, that it's asking us to be more mindful and more aware of where we are today and what's being spoken to us.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, Ruth Ann.
There are big callings which we seem to be focusing on, but for me, there's a ton of little callings, and I wasn't born for a calling. I was born to be a generalist, and I am a generalist. Therefore, every time I am open, I try to be open all the time to being a freelancer. I'm
Right?
on call,
Yes.
so to speak.
Yes. And I think that is another very good point, because yes, you do tend to think of the big callings as being, what we're talking about here, but Ruth Ann is right. We get little callings all the time. We get these nudges and whispers from our soul all the time. Yes.
Okay, I remember now. The calling leading into another calling.
Yes.
Maybe it takes smaller steps to get to the big calling. Like,
There you go.
it has to be broke up into
Right.
smaller goals or smaller.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, one
Absolutely.
calling at a time until you reach.
And that is it, exactly.
Ultimate calling.
Yes. Mary.
And as we do these callings, we become different people too. And so the person that we were at the first calling, we may not be anymore. And so.
Right.
Probably.
And I think that is,
Constantly evolving.
I think that is a very good point, because, we tend to think of it being, a one direction thing, it's one specific thing, but we are evolving and changing all the time. This is everybody's calling today, is to be tolerant of this 14-year-old girl who,
She's love. She's pure love.
she is.
She's a
she-
puppy today. She's in good shape for being 14.
Yeah, she is.
Very
That's
good
fine.
shape.
So and I think
Healthy.
all of this ties all together with what Ruth Ann is saying about all these little small callings. That many times the small callings are cumulative and become a much bigger calling.
Good point.
But sometimes we have to step outside in order to see how all these different components come together for the same thing. Okay? And yes.
I'm just being funny. I've got a calling to call Ruth Ann for help.
Well, there you are, you see. That is it, exactly.
Generalist.
Yeah.
So it's
General.
I was going to say that, not to be confused with general.
well, maybe it is. That is the whole thing. Maybe it is the whole thing. That being the general is being the organizer of your life and other people's lives as they allow. The next thing that he calls on is immediately turning a call into a big project, thereby intimidating yourself into paralysis. And the next one is self-sabotage. You feel called to go to art or medical school, but are so afraid of finding out you don't have what it takes that you forget to mail the application until after the deadline has passed. Distracting yourself with other activities. You suddenly become inspired to finish old projects you haven't thought about in ages. Playing sour grapes. You believe you won't succeed at a calling or will suffer unduly for it, and so you try to convince yourself that you don't want it anyway. For example, you're called towards a vocation for which you feel unqualified. So you tell yourself that the job you have now isn't really so bad after all. At least you have a job, and besides, work isn't everything. Or you're called to enter a relationship you're afraid will end as badly as all the others. So you go on a fault-finding mission or throw a fit in order to create safe distance. Interesting, isn't it?
Sounds like it's all self-sabotage.
Well, I think a lot of it is self-sabotage, but some of it is more obviously self-sabotage than the other things.
Yeah, some
You
of it
know.
hits you in the face.
Yeah, exactly. Some of it is in your face self-sabotage. Okay. Maybe you're called to blow the whistle on your company's nefarious activities, but you also have a family to support. So you tell yourself that risking your job for a principal is for saints and suckers. Or, people that they're called to have children but are terrified of becoming the kind of parent that their parents were. So they tell themselves that the world doesn't need any more children. The danger is not that the soul should doubt whether there is any bread, the novelist Simon Weil once wrote, but that, by a lie, it should persuade itself that it is not hungry. Isn't that awesome? The next one is trying to make yourself unworthy of a calling, hoping that God will decide that you're not the person for the job and take it back.
Always give him the name of someone else.
Well, this was the strategy that was used by a man whose story that Greg Lavoie ran across in a fascinating book entitled God's Yes Was Louder Than My No, Rethinking the African American Call to Ministry. And this was a man named Arthur Kemp, that when he was a boy, his family predicted he would be a preacher, a prophecy he was determined to put the lie to. So, when he was stationed at an army base in New Jersey and heard a voice telling him, "Go feed my sheep," and heard it twice more within half an hour, he recognized it as a call to preaching ministry. And he decided to follow in the footsteps not of Jesus, but of Jonah. I had been taught, he said, that if you're going to be a vessel for God, you have to be a fit vessel. And you've got to have good behaviour, good morals, good ethics. So I determined I was going to be the worst possible human being that you could be, so as to make myself unfit to be a minister. He wasn't a drinking man then, but he started drinking. He wasn't a gambler, but he began gambling and drug dealing and pimping. He wasn't a fugitive, but in a spiritual sense, he became one. I just became a dyed-in-the-wool rascal with the avowed intention of not responding to that call. By 1959, after years of living the low life and the high life simultaneously, he bottomed out, lost as much self-respect as a person can lose without looking in the mirror and seeing nothing, and he took to living on the streets and sleeping in fourth-rate hotels. He decided to move to Los Angeles, and kind of like Tarshish, isn't it? And on the way there stopped in Columbus, Ohio to visit his parents. The visit turned into an extended stay. He began showing up at church on Sundays, and 3 months later, when his mother asked if he'd accompany her to a prayer meeting, he went. And just as the pastor was making his closing remarks, Arthur felt a sudden flush of heaviness in my heart, as if I was carrying the weight of the world on me, and he broke into uncontrollable sobbing. Nobody understood what was happening to him except the pastor, who said, "I know what's wrong with him. He hasn't told me, but I know what's wrong with him." And then Arthur blurted out, "I've got to preach. I've got to preach. I've got to preach." And the pastor said, "I know it, and you're not going to have any peace until you do." It took him 14 years to get a bachelor's degree in religious studies, working part-time, going to school part-time, and supporting a family. His first pastorate was in a country church in Ohio, and his last, from which he retired recently, was a Baptist church in Akron called Mount Olive, named fittingly after the place at which the ascension is said to have occurred. So, all these different strategies, ways of avoiding, unfortunately, if the whispers of your soul are loud enough, then you're not going to get away from it. It is, and you know, there's many ways of looking at it. You can look at it that it is God that's pushing you, or, you know, whatever. But if you believe it is your own higher power, it is your own self that came here with a mission to do something, and that now you are being called upon to move into whatever it was that you decided that you were going to do, to bring, to share, to accomplish while you were here. Then you can see why some of these things, you're not actually derailed, although you try to all the time. It's keeping you on the path that you have chosen. That's the interesting thing about it, that you have chosen. So, can you say no? I mean, you tell me from what everything you've heard so far. Can we say no? Yes, Jason.
All I can give is my example, and it might be relevant here,
Yeah.
is when I started looking for a place that shared these kind of beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
I found Center of Life about 8 months ago.
Right.
So it took me 8 months to show up here.
Uh-huh.
But no matter how I tried to avoid it or try to make some kind of something weird out of it or something, I still ended up coming. So so I mean, it's just kind of I was saying no, but yeah, eventually it just,
Yeah.
you just kind of,
That's
things lead up and it
very cool.
leads to it. So.
It might not be this lifetime, but.
Right.
We're all about weird. Thank you very much.
I think that's I think Deandra made a very good point. It may not be this lifetime. Akhilesh.
So I was talking with Kathy before the thing started today, and we were talking about the Hindu conception that there's three bodies. There's your physical body,
Yes.
called the Sthul Sharir, then there's your subtle body, which is your Sushma Sharir, which is all your memories and your thoughts and stuff.
Right.
And then there's your inner divinity that's unchanging for all.
Right.
The subtle body is what leaves when you die, and I think in Western conception they call the subtle body and the divinity sort of a combination is called the soul.
Uh-huh.
But so the subtle body, I think, goes through different lives, carrying its bundle of experiences and memories. And
Okay.
so, and I think I mean, it's not that I have personal knowledge of that, but there's too many people saying that for me to doubt them.
Right.
Too many different ways of saying it. So, if that's the case, then as we go through different lives, it's possible that we, you call it your higher self or whatever, that you want to continue along something you were doing. So maybe
Right.
you're compelled to be a teacher, or you're compelled to be a social worker, or to help people who are dying, or to help people who are old. So I think these are all. So I can see where callings come from.
Right.
From the past, from your other lives, not past, but your other lives, where
Right.
you are undergoing similar or complementary experiences.
And so, if you do believe in, other lives and reincarnation, do you believe that every life is the continuation of the same calling?
But it might be complementary. like I
Hope
said.
not.
Yes. Mary.
Well, I'm not gonna go there, but I rejected my call twice. I said no 2 times, and the first time I was pretty young and pretty stupid, but I had an opportunity right out of high school to go to work for Vanderveers, and I don't know if those of you who are from Tulsa, they used to have fabulous ads and fabulous windows, and people came from all over. And that's what I wanted to do, was that kind of drawing. And I took my work to the lady at Vanderveers, and she looked at me. I was in high school, and she said, "Oh yes," she said, "well, if you will do this for 6 months, every day for 6 months, and then come back to me, and if you still want to do it, then I will give you a job." And I was like, "Whoa, this is so cool." And so I did it. And every day I would do a new drawing, and I would line them up against the wall in my parents' house. And after about 5, I didn't like the first one anymore, and I'd throw it away, and I'd keep going. And then I had an epiphany that it was going to take a lot of work. And I was going to have to spend all my time doing this. And I was, 18, and I thought, I don't think so. I want to go have some fun and go do a bunch of stuff that I've never done before, and so I'm not going to do that. And so I let it go.
Right.
And so it took so from 18 to 33, divorced with an 11-year-old daughter that I was going to have to take care of myself. I said, I'm going to do this with
Wow.
no money. But I knew that if that time was going, and if I didn't, I would never have another chance.
How interesting. Yes.
Wow.
So, anybody else have similar experiences? Said no. Yes, Jody.
I got hit over the head with a calling one time.
Uh-huh.
I was teaching 7th grade science plus boys PE. And I had sent my application in to a couple of places, and I went to see Michelangelo, and at the end of that I said, "Okay, God, what do you want me to do?"
Uh-huh.
And that very minute I got a call from Wasatch Academy in Utah, boarding school.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
So it was an actual call.
She got a call about a cult. Yeah.
Did you go?
yes, sight unseen.
Deandra.
I was searching for my calling
Uh-huh.
for many years, and I could not figure out what it was. And so I knew I needed to do something, and so I decided I wanted to be a therapist because I'd been through a lot of therapy, and it was very useful. So I applied for a master's program in social work.
Uh-huh.
And I kept getting these letters from them saying that they had not received my transcripts, my letters of recommendation, et cetera, and I'd sent them, so I'd have it all sent again.
Wow.
And on the 3rd time, they said, well, we're not accepting you because you never sent your stuff. And I'm like, what? And so about a month later, I get a letter saying, oh, so sorry, we put all of your stuff in somebody else's file with the same name. But sorry, they're already in the program, so apply again next year.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, I got it. I went, the universe is telling me
This
that
is
was the
not
wrong
for
road to
you.
go down.
Yes.
And so then I was like back to square one. And so I was talking to a friend one night on the phone, and I said, I just don't know what to do. And she said, well, have you considered chiropractic? And I said, well, I don't even know what a chiropractor is. And so I said, but I'll think about exploring it. And I went to sleep. In the morning, I woke up and I sat bolt upright in bed. Now, mind you, I'm not a morning person. This never, ever happened. I just went, boom, sat up in bed and I screamed, that's it! And then I'm like, what the hell? I didn't even know what a chiropractor was.
Wow.
But it was coming through me, so I went, okay, I'll check it out.
Right.
And, 35 years of practice later.
There you go.
So,
Wow.
So the universe does speak to you.
Yes.
You're willing to listen, but it can be pretty dramatic.
It can be. Acolyte.
We mentioned this before, I think, in the previous sessions, but I just want to say it again. I think there's an underlying belief that's running through this discussion that we have callings, and if we are lucky, we are following them. If not, then we are sort of doing something wrong.
Right.
And I would like to push back against that and reiterate that I think we are all doing what we choose to do.
Right.
We may have gone through different paths. There may be some dramatic moments where we want to do something but end up doing something else. But I think ultimately everyone is doing what they choose to do. And everyone is pursuing their calling, whether they know it or not.
And that's where I think the idea of free will comes in. She obviously agrees with it. Yeah, yes.
I do agree with Akhilesh, but I think that a lot of it's subconscious, and we're not aware of the decisions we're making. And if we're not aware of those decisions, we're self-sabotaging without, it's kind of like a victim mentality, something outside of us.
Right.
But somehow we got to
But that's
become
when
aware of
that's
those,
when I think
kind of like your friend coming in.
I just want to respond to what Jason said. Yeah, I totally agree. I think the decisions that are being made are not being made at this level.
No.
They might be made by ourselves.
Right.
There may actually be conflict at this level where we think that we are doing something, but it's our overself, for lack of a better word. That's what Seth calls it. Which is sort of deciding, and in other words, our subtle body, that goes from life to life.
Yeah.
That is sort of deciding what we do.
Right.
So.
I would like to say, though, that I think in all of this, maybe subconsciously pursuing things all your life and then suddenly starting to do something you never thought you'd do, like mediumship.
Right.
I think there is something to do with divine timing in all of this.
Oh yeah, I think
And
that's another
you can
component.
you can spend your whole life having no idea you're going to start doing something and then go, well, I never thought I'd do this.
Absolutely.
I
Deandra?
have an addendum to my story, a
Yes.
precursor.
Yes.
A friend took me, she said, oh, I heard about this psychic healer. And I said, what's a psychic healer?
Yeah.
So we went, and the guy's sitting there, and he's looking at me. He just kept staring at me, and I finally was like getting really nervous. And I said, what's wrong? And he said, no, I'm just staring at your hands. You have the most incredible healing hands. And I said, what are you talking about? I'm a travel agent. That's my calling, and he's like, no, you're a healer. And I went, no, I'm not. And this was 2 years previous.
Before.
And then deregulation hit, the whole bottom fell out of travel industry, and I
Right.
went, I need a new calling.
Yes. Well, and we
Divine
need to,
timing.
if we can finish with, as Krishna said to Arjuna, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
So I couldn't hear